Good evening and welcome. It's Tom Sykes, the Royalist here. I'm absolutely thrilled to have the immense pleasure of welcoming somebody tonight who I've known for more than a decade, Tim Teeman, critic extraordinaire. We first worked together back in our Daily Beast days. Tim was my editor. He actually played a pivotal role in getting the very first iteration of the Royalist newsletter off the ground. Having him here this evening feels not just professionally rewarding, but genuinely emotional, a bit of a full circle moment, really. Tim's resume speaks for itself. He's an award-winning journalist, literally, I would say dozens of awards from New York Press Club, the Los Angeles Press Club, the NLGJA, and he's the author of a brilliant book called In Bed with Gore Vidal, which is a credible portrait of one of those real, one of America's probably most complicated and discussed sort of literary figures. But he's also, why I've asked him to come tonight is because he's just a brilliantly perceptive observer of celebrity, of the culture, and he lives in America, but he grew up in the UK, and he's probably just the only person I know who's as steeped in the royal story as me. I'd say Tim could tell you the whole royal story from beginning to end, just like Kitty Kelly. So actually, Tim, I wanted to ask you before we get into tonight, how did you first get interested in the royals? Was it because for me it was Diana and the funeral and everything? What was it for you that kind of got you interested in them?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what it was like for you, Tom, and I can't remember if we discussed this before, because as Tom said, we just, we worked on news stories and features day in, day out together for years and years. But for me, it was growing up. I mean, as a kid growing up in Britain in the 70s and 80s, the royals were very much part of the tabloid landscape, less so the broadsheet landscape in those days. It was very much, opening fates and generally just being there, and the Queen releasing lovely pictures of various things, and things being very placid and very sort of normal, apart from those moments like when Princess Anne was almost kidnapped on the Mall in the mid-70s. But those stories were kind of aberrations. The royals as vector of drama and controversy and of incident and of interest and of flashbulbs really only came about when I was around 8 or 9 years old, which is when Diana and Charles got engaged and then married in 1981. And I would say from that moment onwards, really, I was a young kid then, but then growing up through the 80s of Diana and Charles's marriage, and then the first hit of that marriage leaving the tracks, I was very much keyed into it. But I mean, really every Brit is, even if they don't want to be. That's the weird thing about the royals and being British, at least in that generation. I think people's patience with them.
You didn't really have any choice.
You kind of didn't. They're sort of, they're leaked into your system, and just an awareness of them and who they are as characters and their general presence in British life is very much inscribed in a certain way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Tim, I know also, because this is one of my favorite things to get you talking about, Tim's a huge, proud soap opera fan. Mm-hmm. And you often used to talk to me about how a really good way to understand the royals and to see the royals is to understand it as a soap opera. And I'd love you just to talk about that, because you used to talk really interestingly about how in soap operas themes come and go, characters come to the fore and then characters drop back. But I guess the thing I never understood is it deliberately, do you feel it's deliberately constructed and spun to us as a soap opera, or is a soap opera sort of more of a reflection of life than we might imagine?
I think originally the royals spun themselves to Britain as the family. So before the notion of them being a soap opera, and when the spinners had a clear field of not much inquisitiveness and just them being there, they were the British royal family. And as such, and I think there remains a strain of this, in some ways British people and fans of the royal family, and even their detractors, map onto them the dynamics of their own family life, whether rich or poor or middle class, working class, upper class. There is something in the structure of that family, regardless of their insane riches and their insane privilege, but people like to map onto them. So we can see fathers falling out with sons, or mothers trying to take a commanding role into, there are certain dynamics within that family that people feel they can sometimes map onto their own. I think the soap opera element was a tabloid invention. I think the tabloids, when Diana and Charles's marriage unraveled and when Fergie entered the frame in the 80s, don't forget, the 80s, when the Royals went supersonic, was the same time of soap operas like Dallas and Dynasty and Knots Landing and Falcon Crest and Sons and Daughters. TV was awash with soap opera as a form in the 80s, less so in the 90s. They began to die out a bit. They're still around, obviously, but certainly in the 80s, the very glamorous soap opera was pretty much evening viewing for quite a lot of people. Now, the Royals, in contrast, very rich, very privileged, lived in palaces, wore those ridiculous clothes as well. So in a way, there were these two popular cultural forms, the soap opera on television and the soap opera that was beginning to unravel in terms of marital troubles and briefings and scandals that was happening in this very real life rich family. And from that moment, I think the tabloids began to cast the royal family as a soap opera. The public began to consume the royal family as a soap opera. And from that moment, when things went really out of control with incidents like Diana's death, Harry and Meghan's quitting to go and live in America, William and Kate, will they, won't they, all kinds of dramatic threads. I mean, people weren't inventing this. They weren't sort of saying the royals are like a soap opera. The royals were behaving like a soap opera. And so I think the description of a soap opera, the description of the royals as a soap opera, I should say, began to leave the palace spinners' hands as a concept, because quite frankly, the members were behaving like one. So it was no leap of faith or leap of invention to describe them as so.
Right. But I mean, it does remain the principal way, I suppose, that we do consciously or unconsciously understand them. And
I think so, yes. I mean, we invent heroes and villains. There are long-running storylines. There are short-running storylines. If you look at the pace of royal news and the characters currently populating the royal family, they are like a soap opera on television. So you can map those things. Now, I think sometimes journalists, and I think we as consumers as well, can sometimes map things wrongly onto the family in our bid to see them as a soap opera, because soap operas can also simplify, right? The dynamics of a villain getting their just desserts, a princess exerting her strength, a prince getting the woman he really loves. I think we see these things on our tabloid front pages, and I think sometimes the dynamics of a soap opera that we like to think can sometimes obscure the much more complex family and real life dynamics that might be going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you say, the estrangement of fathers and sons, and that's been a long-running theme in over the last couple of years. Yeah. It's Shakespearean indeed. And in fact, interestingly enough, actually, I'm just going to show our viewers this picture. So this is the picture of Andrew, Charles, and Prince William. Now, the royals often do this thing, which Tim, of course, would be well aware of, where they like to arrange themselves for photographs in the order of succession. So, so Charles, and you see Andrew there very close to Charles, because obviously Andrew still feels that he may now be eighth, but in a sense he's always been spare. Do you know, he was Charles's spare, so he feels very close to Charles, that he's entitled to be at Charles's right hand. Fergie in the background there, looking like something out of a Vermeer painting, really. And then this bishop in his magnificent purple robes, and William looking very glumly off to one side. And there's actually a later photograph of Andrew trying to talk to William, which is, I think, going to go down in history as one of the great royal photographs of all time. But this photograph, of course, really speaks to the sort of massive family dysfunction. You know, this guy hates that guy, that guy hates that guy. but what what we're really here to talk about tonight, sorry, to get back to the main issue,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Harry. So
Yes.
this
Right.
photograph was taken on the 8th of September, so just over a month ago. And it's Harry at the Well Child Awards in London. And this photo went around the world, and even Amanda Platel in the Daily Mail wrote that, you know, it was lovely to have Harry back. He was a breath of fresh air. He was so jolly. He was so cheerful. He was so wonderful. And it looked like this huge PR campaign by the Sussexes to, you know, bring Harry in from the cold, or whatever you want to call it, had worked, right? At least it hadn't fully worked. There are plenty of skeptical people on my Substack and on these channels, you know, who said this is all just a PR stunt. But
Yeah.
basically, the media were prepared to go along for the ride, right? And say, yeah, Harry's great. The Daily Mail were prepared to say, Harry's great, blah, 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 blah. Now, fast forward 5 weeks, and basically, so sorry, 2 days after this, Harry got to meet his father. That, in a way, you know, obviously in the hierarchy of the royals, that's the ultimate kind of, you know, the ultimate blessing, isn't it? The ultimate, you're back in the fold, you get to meet the king, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. But then one day after that, he gave an interview to The Guardian, didn't he, Tim? So why don't you pick up the story for a bit and tell people?
Well, it's kind of sure. I mean, and please, you're the expert, so please just tell me if I miss something out or get something in the wrong order. Seriously, I don't want to mislead your viewers.
No.
Mislead your viewers. I mean, the idea was for the summit between father and son to remain secret, and essentially this was Charles would see him, but really on the basis that whatever was said in that room was going to be between father and son, and if it was going to be the first stepping stone to a reconciliation, that it would be genuinely private. Because the context we're slightly missing here is, obviously, in the moments that I think there was another meeting between Charles and Harry a few years ago, right, where then Harry blabbed to, I think it was Hoda Kotb on the Today Show or an American anchor, and told them what had happened. So every time there was supposed to be this discreet contact between Harry and Palace or Harry and father, there instead was a kind of public sort of leaking afterwards of what had happened. So the idea here was that he wasn't going to do that, and whatever was said this time, you know, we've already had everything that he said in Spare, which, you know, which obviously infuriated the family in terms of what he dished in that. So this was going to be a discreet meeting, but a few days later, Harry tells The Guardian it had all gone well. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but didn't he add a phrase like, and especially because this year is going to be so important for my dad, which again threw some concern or light on Charles's health, which of course the Palace don't want at all.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly it, Tim. So Harry said to The Guardian, I mean, it's just inexplicable because I think it was quite provocative to go to Ukraine in the first place. I mean, but ultimately he's doing amazing work there, right? And that's what he wants to do, is he wants to shine a light on these people. So fine, you take a journalist with you, fine. But when that journalist says, how did the meeting with your dad go, right? You've done media training, I've done media training, I've given media training. What I would have advised anyone to, it's not very complicated. What you say is, you say, do you know what? Thank you so much for asking, but actually it was a private meeting with my father. And really, more importantly than that, I really want to keep the focus on these incredible people here in Ukraine. That's what we're here to talk about. That you know, it's a really, really easy response. Instead, Harry launches into this thing about how he wants to bring the children back to the UK, and then comes up with this line where he says, the focus over the next year really needs to be on my dad, which for the Palace completely set off alarm bells, because it very much reminded them of what he said in the BBC interview after he lost the legal case about his security, where he said, I don't know how long my father has left, which was just an extraordinary thing to say, because the Palace, as you say, is totally focused on denying that Charles is ill. Now, I've written a lot. Now, I do, and I want to just show another picture here. And sorry, this is one of the things I just want to say to my Substack people. One of the reasons I'm doing this on YouTube with Tim is because it's very hard to show pictures on the Substack. But I do want to show this picture. This picture was taken late last week, and I was really shocked at how bad Charles looked. Like, of course, I understand. You know, he's having treatment for cancer, and he's been like incredibly kind of brave, and you know, I can't say enough about how amazing Charles has been. But the Palace are trying to basically, if you read the British media, right, you would think that Charles really has nothing more than a sort of nasty cold. I mean, that's how it's being portrayed a lot. And then occasionally they'll just throw things in like, of course, he's seriously ill or whatever. It's like they're trying to hide it in plain sight a bit. But now you and I, Tim, of course, lots of people think that this is evidence for great conspiracy by the British media. In fact, it's a lot of it is to do with the law around what you can say in the UK, and especially after the Leveson inquiry. You do have a right to privacy around your health. So, you know, even if somebody went to them and said, Charles has this kind of cancer, he's got this long to live, and these are you couldn't actually report it in the UK. But that being beside the point, so the Palace has exploited that and is trying to push forward a narrative that Charles is doing really well, that he's doing fine, and that, you know, everything is good. And so having Harry come up and say things like, I don't know how long he has left, I want to keep the focus on my dad, these kinds of things, is just incredibly unhelpful and incredibly stupid. He must know it would provoke them. But anyway, but then just to pick the story up, so I'll just I think we'll go back to that picture because that is the greatest picture of all time.
I think in that picture, William would really appreciate the Berlin Wall just being available, just to be right down the middle there, if possible. if it was still around, just a little slice of the Berlin Wall, just to be able to take to church if and when needed. Basically,
just 1 foot of the Berlin Wall is all I need. 1 foot, yeah. That'd be absolutely perfect. But then, okay, so after the Guardian thing, right, then this weird story appears in Us Weekly, saying that there have been hugs and tears at the meeting, that it's all been really emotional, that, you know, it's been this incredible kind of. We'll go to Us, Tim. We'll go to Us. We'll give the viewers more of our beautiful faces.
Sorry.
That it's been this fantastic, you know, emotional meeting, that it's been so incredible and blah, 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 blah. And the Palace basically start briefing that that's not the case at all, that it's been very formal, that it's then Harry, and I felt like they were I wrote this at the time, I felt like they were setting a trap for Harry by saying it was very formal. It was like an audience. It was like a diplomatic reception. All these kinds of things were all the phrases they used. Very provocative to Harry, because, of course, the thing that he's always said in his memoir was that the family briefed against him in the media, and that this was very damaging to his mental health. That this led to Meghan feeling suicidal. That, you know, so this is a real button for him. And they set the trap perfectly. They set the trap absolutely perfectly. Oh, you know, he's got overexcited. He's mistaken a cup of tea and a slice of cake for the Treaty of Versailles. It was all very formal. He just got given, you know, he was squeezed in between other people. This was the briefing that came out to the Sun. And Harry did the stupidest thing that he could have. He reacted and he said, no, it wasn't like that at all. The men in grey suits are trying to sabotage the relationship with my father. Again, do you want to just explain to people why is that men in grey suits phrase so provocative? Because it was a Diana thing, wasn't it?
It was, yes. I mean, the men in grey suits were first summoned up by Diana in her interview, her book and interviews, and these are the sort of unseen civil servants and aides of the palace that run things behind the scenes. I mean, everybody knows that in places of great power, whether it be government or palaces, you know, there's a cadre of people behind the main players who we see on the public stage who are pulling the levers. Now, for Diana and for other members of the royal family, I think they've made it very clear that these people exert a huge amount of power and influence. And Harry, in Spare, names those people and also makes the same claim as his mother. And a couple of days, as you say, Tom, a few days ago said that these people were again actively sabotaging efforts to reconcile with his father. So again, putting a lot of power and malevolent power in Harry's eyes at the hands of these people. Now, I've always found the presence of those sorts of people fascinating, because anybody who's been around power knows that indeed those people exist. Only Harry and his father know how much. The fascinating thing is, does Charles allow the men in grey suits, as they are sort of collectively known, that amount of power? Do the men in grey suits actively influence and get in the way of familial relationships between father and sons? That's the question. Harry obviously feels very much that they do. And I think the other fascinating thing...
But do you believe that? Do you believe that the men in grey suits wake up one morning and over there crunching up cornflakes say, do you know what I'm going to do this morning? I'm going to screw up the relationship between Harry and the king because it suits my purpose. I mean, if like, Charles is not an idiot. I mean, he's fired plenty of people in his life. I mean, if you weren't doing what he wanted, surely he would just fire you. I mean, it's never seemed a very credible...
you say that, but you've reported... You say that, but you've reported in the past on that very famous long-standing servant who was only fired after years of people within the palace really not liking his influence, even within sort of palace halls, right? He and the guy who used to famously squeeze his toothpaste on the toothbrush. He was only eventually...
Although Charles did say about him, I could do with anyone but Michael. I could do without anyone but Michael.
Exactly.
So I just think it was incorrect to think that Michael Fawcett was a law unto... I mean, I think he actually, in the end, he was a liability, but he was also like the idea that he woke up one morning and was having his crunch nut cornflakes and said, you know what, I'm going to solicit €1 million donation in plastic bags for someone's passport.
But if you have as the imprimatur of your boss saying, I can do with anyone but not Michael, or whatever that quote, what amazing quote that you just said was. If you think about what that quote actually says, which is when Charles isn't in the room and when X person is patrolling the halls, doing the paperwork, getting the chessboard pieces in places, that means that person does have a lot of power. And that person, I'm not saying that ultimately father and son can't pick up the phone together and sort whatever it is out. But if you're saying, I can't do without this person, that means to me, day to day, that person has an incredible latitude of power within their working confines within the palace. Now, I don't know what that means in terms of practical obstruction of familial relations, but I think it is fascinating that there may be very powerful people working within the palace with the imprimatur of power, and how that power may be being discharged, used, abused, whatever, on a day-to-day basis, I think ultimately comes signaling from the boss. And I think this weekend, what we saw, the latest twist of this story, which is the one that's really fascinating, is that just when we thought Harry's security arrangement issue was settled, he wasn't going to get it. The courts have ruled on it. As you reported this Sunday, and I think, was it coming out of a British newspaper originally, is that
Sunday Times.
Harry is now written to the Home Secretary to again request special security dispensation for him and his family coming to this country. Now, for you, Tom, I know that isn't this the real next fly in the ointment between possibly a father and son reconciliation? Because doesn't this mean the question of whether Harry gets the special person security, the special, was it Royals and Celebrity Protection Package? Doesn't this ultimately again go to Charles as a kind of, do you want him to have it type of situation between the palace and government, or can Charles wash his hands of it and say nothing to do with me, this is a government decision, and him and Harry's relationship can continue unimpeded from it?
So Charles has, yes, exactly. So you're exactly right, Tim. And so Harry, when he was a member of the British royal family, was given 24-hour automatic armed security, right? So he decided that he wanted to go and buy a packet of... Okay, very good example. A friend of his, he was talking to a friend on the phone in like 2017, and the friend got mugged and the phone got nicked. And Harry knew where he was because he was like on Wandsworth Bridge or something. And Harry went, oh my God, we've got to go and help Tom. So he jumped on his motorbike, I think it was his motorbike or his car, I can't remember, and raced over. And of course, the protection guys had to go with him because that's just the nature of like how it works. Like, of course, usually you tell them what you're doing. But ultimately, if you decide to go to the shops and buy a pack of cigarettes, they've got to come with you. So Harry wants that back. He wants that full automatic armed security back. The problem for I won't say the palace, but I'd say the establishment, is that what that means is it would mean that Harry or Meghan could land at Heathrow Airport, send a text 10 minutes before they land saying, hey, we're on BA001 from, NYC. And the police would be legally obligated to meet them on the tarmac and give them a blues and twos escort to wherever they wanted to go. And to keep 4 guys on them, or whatever, 6 guys maybe on them 24 hours a day. So what that also means is, right, and think about how one culture explained this to me, was if you think of it in the context of Remembrance Day, right, which is coming up in a month's time, right, always a big point of conflict between Harry and the family. Because Harry tends to do something in America, like he'll go to Arlington, he'll make a speech, he'll, and fair enough, man. The guy was in the military, right? He served in the military. He's had friends killed, in combat. So, but as this courtier said to me, imagine if hanging in the back of the Royal Senate was the fear that Harry could turn up on November the 10th at Heathrow and go, I'm doing a big event with Invictus, and totally blow the whole cenotaph thing off the front. Now, I'm not saying Harry would, but he could, right? He could if he had that automatic security.
Yeah, I don't think there's any scenario where Harry would do that. But what I do think, and what I do think could be a concern here, I see this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's clearly a status power play going on here, right? Harry wants the status and power that comes with that security. Now, he says he needs the security in order for his wife and children to come back. If Meghan and the kids if Charles wants to see them, they're going to need this. They're going to need this kind of security, this literal, practical security blanket when they come back to the UK. Now, this ties into the relationship with father and son, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't this all come back to, if you want us here, Dad, and if we want these relations back on board and back on track, we need to feel safe coming to see you. What gives? And I suppose, is that the question, Tom, or am I wide of the mark there, sort of thing?
No, I think it absolutely is. But I think that how Charles arguably sees it is well, I know for a fact, because what the people have said to me is it's an incredibly awkward situation where His Majesty's son is suing His Majesty's government in His Majesty's courts, right? Which is the situation that they were in. I mean, it is mind-blowing when you think about it, And they were very afraid that there was going to be a rerun of the Paul Burrell thing. They were very afraid that Harry would say, well, actually, my father said to me that it's totally fine. Daddy said it's fine. I can have my security back. And then they would have to get the king and they would have to call him to court. And they would have to say, did you or did you not say that he could have his security? Because if the king did say he could have his security back, make no mistake, he could have his security back. Right. The palace denies that. The palace says it's not in the gift of the king, but I think it's pretty clear that the king is the head of state. Shall we say, significant sway over such a matter. And his private secretary, Clive Alderton, sits on this body, Ravek. And now the palace again say, look, he's just a liaison position. He's not there to make decisions or lobby on behalf of one person or the other. This has all been through the courts a million times. Let's not go into it again. And the idea was, when Harry lost the case, the impression seemed to be that's the end of it. He's lost. It's cost him £1 million, or probably more actually, and it's over. So at least now the silver lining is that he can rebuild the relationship with the king. But by writing to the Home Secretary, which again is like a sort of unbelievably entitled thing to do, I think. I mean, you or I wouldn't just write a letter to the Home Secretary and expect it to be read. Do you know what I mean? By writing a letter to the Home Secretary, Harry's basically just reopened the whole situation all over again. So
absolutely.
I just read the exact quotes from the Sunday Times. So Roy Nicker said, a royal source said, the king cannot and will not lobby. And by the way, this is almost certainly an official in Charles's office, maybe the press office, maybe the private secretary's office. We don't know. I don't know who our sources are, but I know this is somebody authorized to speak, right? This is not just like a former employee. The king cannot and will not lobby. That's inappropriate. His representatives cannot advocate for policy outcomes, particularly in relation to his own family. This is a very long statement. The royal household representative on the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, that's Clive Alderton, overseen by the Home Office, who was famously the wasp in Harry's memoir, the wasp, the bee, and the fly.
I mean, for
your viewers,
for your viewers, one of the grey men in suits.
One of the men in suits. Yes. So exactly when Harry said the men in suits are trying to sabotage the relationship, it was very much people who know the story and know Harry know that he's talking about Sir Clive, basically. It's not their position. They are purely there as liaison to the house. The source added, if you put yourself in the mind of a father who was repeatedly told he should and could intervene, that is not very helpful, complicates matters, and shows a lack of understanding about the reality of the situation. Well, Harry's office actually deny that they have directly asked the king to intervene, but that's not true. I'm sorry, it's not true. But then this is the real killer. Where is it? Where's the line? I'm going to have to use Control F. What did he say? Back to where we were, something like that, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So,
it's not going to help matters, said a royal source. We're back to where we were. Well, so, Tom, as far as I can see it, that means that the reconciliation is over, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, have you spoken to any courtiers or sources since that? I mean, for me, that's a fairly sort of mid-level devastating quote, and I think it reads the same to you as well. Do we think things are back to where they were? I mean that's a real starting line, kind of, all the progress of the last few months / weeks has evaporated. Is that your feel, or I think it
absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, what one person said to me, because Harry then complained, previous to this, Harry complained that a stalker got close to him when he was in London. One person said to me, Harry just doesn't get the message. It's faux naivety. He's pretending not to understand that. He's pretending not to understand. Sorry, that's yeah. Well, there's. I mean, as Sabs McDabs, great name. That is one point of view. Yeah. But sorry, I was distracted. So yes, what this person said to me was, if he doesn't want to be harassed by stalkers on the streets of London, the answer is very simple: stay in California. Now, that was a very, very brutal assessment, and it was very uncompromising. And some people in my circle did call me and say, "Are you sure about this?" And then when I saw this story in the Sunday Times, which I felt said a sort of very, very similar thing, basically, of, we're done. That's kind of the message that I get. And it's
that says to me that patience at the palace has run. It's interesting to me. A few years ago, when this story really began, there seemed to be a degree of latitude around giving Harry a degree of latitude to be either kind of wild or slightly kind of unpredictable and slightly. But I sense since Spare and since William's iron rod sort of came down, there just seems to be really not much latitude in interpreting Harry's off-brand behavior as in any other way as to just be condemned and just to be like, we're done with this. So what I mean is there seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from the palace and from Charles and from whatever those men in grey suits and whatever the people around him are feeling, is that if Harry wants this reconciliation, and if Harry really does want to come back into the fold, there is very little room for him to get things wrong, or either on a PR basis or in how he's talking to the press or not talking to the press. And it seems to be saying to me implicitly, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert, that play it by our way, Harry, or there's no way, sort of thing. And the thing with Harry is he seems still, even with that implicitly hanging over his head, to be playing things his own way, therefore leading to more possible estrangement, essentially.
I think that's a really, really interesting analysis. I think that the other thing that I would say is that people are like, the story in the Sunday Times said that he's risking the reconciliation by continuing to lobby and pursue and argue for security.
Yeah.
I actually think it's more than that. I think he's prepared. I think he's actually prepared to sacrifice his relationship with his father if he can get, and with the rest of his family, if he can get the security.
Okay,
and
so
that's really
the thing. Wow. Okay, that's
because like he can't be under any illusions that this was going to go down incredibly badly. Writing to the Home Secretary again, it's like you're writing to the Home Secretary of His Majesty's government saying that the decision of His Majesty's courts is wrong, and all this kind of stuff. It's very complex constitutionally.
Okay, so Tom, what for Harry then, Tom, what wins out? Why choose the battle over security provision over a continued or revived relationship with his family? What's the thinking of Harry there? One would think, readers would think, or fans of the royal family, if they exist in any kind of way, would think a personal, loving reconciliation with loved ones would trump a fight over security. So for Harry, why does security trump that reconciliation possibility?
I think because without security, he's effectively exiled, and by being exiled, it's a miserable place to be. But I think that the other thing that's quite interesting about this whole story is that last week, the Daily Mail were running this story saying there was an establishment plot, right, to get Harry and Meghan back to the UK, to get them their security back, so they could be
Operation
back in the UK.
Thor.
And this
Operation
Thor. Right. Now, this was very much dismissed by Harry's office. They said, oh, it's all rubbish. It's all made up by Richard Eden. Well, I know Richard Eden, actually, and I messaged him and I asked him, and, Richard is a diary journalist. He would say it himself. He is what in other papers is called a gossip columnist. But, Richard's quite often right about stuff. Like, he's right a hell of a lot more times than the very few times that he's wrong. And he wouldn't just write something like this. And I think what my interpretation of what Richard Eden was saying was that Harry's trying to go around the back of the royal family to sort of effectively ally himself with the kind of, the pinko rats in the government, basically, who dislike the monarchy and like Harry and think that he was treated abominably and blah, 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 and ally himself with them, get them to authorize the security, get the government to the lefties in the government, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, the lefties in the government to authorize the security, even if it blows up the relationship with the family, because then he can come and go as he pleases, and he can do all his events and all his activities.
So I mean, that seems
that's basically what happened.
I mean, that seems like
sort of what happened.
It seems like wishful thinking on Harry's part, because A, that government ain't so left wing, and B, that government at the moment is fairly aligned with the establishment royal family. So I'd be extremely surprised if Shabama Mahmood, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I've been in America too long, is going to greenlight that, given she herself is she's one of the least left-wing Labour Home Secretaries you could imagine. So good luck, Harry.
You're putting me to shame, Tim. You're putting me to shame with your deep knowledge of the... there's a brilliant story of Tom Stoppard went for an interview at the Evening Standard, and he said, I'd like a job in politics. And the editor said, so you're interested in politics, are you? And he said, I am. He said, well, who's the Home Secretary? And Tom Stoppard apparently replied, I said I was interested, not obsessed.
That's really funny. Sorry, that's really, really, really good. I think
sidetrack. But what the Mahmoud is quite conservative, is she?
She's totally not left wing as a home. So as far
Right.
as my reading, and again, British watchers, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies from New York if I'm misreading it, but I don't sense that Shabana Mahmood is a massively left wing Labour Home Secretary. Okay. I think the other really super interesting thing is, I love that quote that you just mentioned from your source, that vicious, brutal quote around them, or they could stay in California, because the other thing we should talk about is that they're on maneuvers. We have seen the other thing that's really been occupying tabloid and broadsheet attention in the last few days is Meghan in Paris. Like, Meghan Markle is on maneuvers. She is not staying in California, and Harry is not staying in California. They've made it very clear differently that they are bestriding the world again. Meghan was in Paris for Fashion Week at Balenciaga. Obviously, stories in the papers today about her not being as close to that label's chief designer as maybe she was selling it. I think that's a bit unfair on her. I think they were in text contact. I mean, they're rich, they're famous. That's how people deal with each other. But that couple is not satisfied by just being in California anymore. And they now clearly, I think they're feeling either emboldened or happy to begin occupying or trying out and experimenting different bits of the world and media stage, whether it's Meghan's TV show that she does with her jam and all that stuff, and going to Paris Fashion Week, and Harry going to London or going to Ukraine. But they are clearly testing out new and for them interesting roles for themselves, which do not now require them, in contrast to two years ago, being sequestered in California. Would you say that is that a correct reading, Tom? These people are on the move, basically.
They are. They totally are, aren't they? And in Europe, in Paris, in London, in New York, it's absolutely fascinating. They've got another big event in New York this week coming up.
Okay.
Meghan's doing a fortune businessy type event. They absolutely are. And look, they want to be the thing that, just a little sidetrack, but the thing that I think is really fascinating here is that what friends of the King have told me, that the playbook here is Edward VIII, right? That is the model of how they are dealing with it. They're like, you know what? We've seen this all before. We've had traitors, which is how they refer to him. We've had traitors before. We've had people try and stitch us up and sell us out before. And most notably Edward VIII, right? Who was the king, who, is widely thought to have collaborated with the Nazis, is believed to, there's been all kinds of allegations about Edward VIII over the years, that he gave plans of Buckingham Palace to the Luftwaffe. I mean, unbelievable stuff. Some of which is true, some of which I'm sure was propaganda against him. But fundamentally, the point was that Edward only came back to England like a handful of times. I mean, I think the funeral of his mother, I suppose that the funeral of his brother, George VI, who died before him, I think it was maybe 4 times, including his own funeral. Do you know what I mean? Like that is how you deal with a treacherous member of the family. You exile them, you starve them of attention, and the thing about Edward VIII was, like, he was like Harry. It was the biggest news story in the world, but he died essentially an unimportant and largely not entirely forgotten, but a very unimportant man without really any influence or any sway. And I can't wait to see. We'll have to get you on to talk about when the new Joan Collins films comes out with Joan as Wallace, which is going to be incredible, I think, in the next few weeks. But that's the playbook, is like, keep them out, lock them away, and keep them out of the fucking country. Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to swear. Keep them out of the country, and like that is the goal. And they're really risking like what they're messing up the plan. They're messing up the plan. If they got security, it would be an absolute disaster for the Royals. It'd be an absolute disaster because it would mean they couldn't control them. And as you know, friends of Harry said to me, this isn't about security. This is about power and control.
Well, but that's what you need to answer, right? Like, why? I suppose as a kind of general onlooker, the question is, why don't the Royals want them back? Does it come down to the fact they're scared that Harry and Meghan are just more popular naturally than they are? And if they let them back into Britain, and if Harry and Meghan have free reign there, they will suck up the oxygen that the Royals themselves want. So what this really comes down to is a residual royal family nervousness and jealousy of the power of Harry and Meghan, and that's why they're being prevented and being sort of stymied in their efforts here.
I think that might have been the case a few years ago, but I think now Harry is so unpopular and Meghan is so unpopular in the UK that I don't think there'd be any risk of popularity. But I think what it would do is it would just destabilize the calendar. It would destabilize, because anything you do, whatever they did, they would overshadow it.
No, so you say that, but also when Harry came back a few weeks ago and did that balloon with that well child picture that you had up a few minutes ago. And again, sorry if I'm misreading this from America, but the vibe was when he was back in London doing the stuff before this latest bout of bad headlines was, oh, it's really nice to have him back and have him smiling and have him doing this charity work that we like him doing and messing with kids. This is the Harry that we like. So I'm not sure that, I don't get the feeling that the British public are intrinsically like, we hate him. I feel like if he keyed into it, there's still a reservoir of goodwill for him there. And does that make the Royals nervous in any way, I suppose?
But I think it does. I think the short answer is yes, I think it does. And I think you're right. It was amazing how quickly the newspapers just came along for the ride and lapped it up. And as I said, Amanda Platel saying how great Harry was one for the ages, definitely. Do you know what I mean? But But anyway, God, Tim, it's been so fantastic talking to you. I can't believe we've been talking far too long.
I'm sorry, everyone.
I've got to let you go. Maybe you're so, and I'm sure everyone can see what I mean about what a brilliant commentator and analyst Tim is. Most brilliant editor, and he's still the theatre critic of the Daily Beast. He writes for the New York Times, the Guardian, Town and Country, and the Times of London, where he worked for many years before working for the Daily Beast in America, when I was lucky enough to work for him. There's so much more to talk about. We'll have to get Tim back on again really soon. He's been absolutely brilliant. Tim, you're a real font of knowledge. And what you are, Tim, and I'll tell you honestly, is you're amazing at understanding the sort of cultural resonances of these things. And because in a way, like, why do we care about the royal family? Like, you're really good. When people ever say to me, why do we care about the royal family? I just go, oh, I don't know. I suppose they're just sort of interesting or stuff like that. But you always have a really intelligent, brainy answer to it.
I don't think it's just, I think in some ways it's projection. And I think in some ways, even if we're estranged from families or if we're in very loving families, there's that family unit thing. And there's this thing called the royal family, which is a unit of a family. And I think there's a degree of projection around people's interest in them. And I also think, Tom, and something that is important, I think, is that it's not low stakes for them. But I think from a public that watches them or consumes them online or in newspapers or wherever people get their royal family news, I think it feels like a bit of either drama or involvement or celebrity or something engagement that they can invest in with a sort of low stakes but kind of devoted interest. And again, they can project their heroes and villains narratives onto them. They can, like any soap, they can key into the storyline and leave the storyline and then come back to it. And although it can be serious for the family involved, the royal family involved, and it can be serious for the correspondents and the reporters and the media organizations that follow them, I think for the public sometimes just having this this set of people who live lives of immense privilege and wealth, going through sort of either, problems that they can in some ways relate to on a human level, can be an engaging thing. And I think on those many levels, the Royals continue to fascinate people. They can be
really
picked
do,
up,
don't they? And even like the other thing is like the Sorry, no, you go on.
I was just going to say they can be picked up and discarded at will, as in terms of a matter of interest in someone's daily life. And you can sometimes feverishly follow them and sometimes not feverishly follow them. And sometimes you'll be out somewhere at supper and someone will go, "Oh, did you see that about that?" And, it's a bit like gossip, and it's a bit like why we like gossip, and it's a bit like why we like soap operas, and it's a bit like why people find families, their own and other people's families, interesting. So if you think about a Venn diagram of interest, the royal family sort of fulfills a multiple number of things in terms of people's engagement, I think. Sorry, you were going to say something,
Absolutely. Tom. No, I wasn't going to. All I was going to say is, like there's always this massive thing about what they're doing for Christmas.
Yeah.
Basically, because we're all obsessed with what we're doing for Christmas.
Right.
So, like we sort of map onto it. Like, where are they going to open their presents? And why are we interested where someone opens their presents?
Who are we going to be with? Like, who do we want to spend that time with? And so when they appear at church on Christmas Day, and you and me and the others, and I mean, people are interested, like, well, who's in the lineup this year? It's a bit like who's around the table, on this kind of like, it's ridiculous. In some ways, it's it's compulsive and serious and ridiculous.
Oh, someone's just said, blame Victoria and Albert about the Christmas obsession. Do you remember that piece I did about how Queen Victoria invented Christmas?
I loved that piece. Yes, indeed. And
that was so interesting. So they invented the Christmas tree. They invented Christmas carols. Did they invent gifts? I don't know.
I don't know, but I'm going to tell all of you.
I think plum pudding. Plum pudding.
Bad words said about Christmas. Can't beat Christmas.
Exactly. The houses, the jewels, the frocks. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Won't hear a bad word.
Brilliant. Well, Tim, we got to go because honestly, me and Tim, I'm not joking. We will stay here all night. It'll be like one of those weird videos that people are posting now of like the history of factories. Have you heard about these videos that like the history of factories? And it's like two people talking for like 19 hours because you can generate clicks on YouTube. People listen to them as they go to sleep. It's just me and Tim talking about the Royals for 19 hours. We could do it.
Remember that time in 1987 when they did that? 19 hours later. You're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry, everyone.
Brilliant. All right, I'm going to click the big red end stream button. Tim, don't go anywhere till it's finished uploading. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Susanna. Bye.